The PlayStation 4 absolutely crushed the competition during the 8th generation of video game consoles. Jules wears hats, Rach plays Dark Souls, Josh is a walking can of hairspray, Ash is one of 3 people who still play Evolve, and I have arm hair that would make a gorilla jealous. Oh, I thought we were pointing out the obvious. With almost 97 million units sold as of the time of recording, I'm gonna hazard a guess you've got a PS4 sitting under your TV right now, or you're watching this very video on a PS4. Well, if you are one of those people, you might be sitting on a moderate goldmine. There are nearly 2,000 titles available for the PS4, and if you're anything like Scott, you own most of them. With digital storefronts becoming much more popular this generation, it's not very often you'd be going from store to store trying to find a copy of whatever game you want because it's right there on the digital store, easy peasy. Sucks for collectors of rarer games, as it doesn't happen so much now. Now, I didn't say that it didn't happen. With limited releases of cult titles to still rare special editions, there are still things PS4 collectors are chasing after. In fact, you could be sitting on one of these right now. As the PS5 eventually releases, these prices might just go up, so bubble wrap it and put it under your pillow. You don't want to be losing these video games. I'm Rich from WhatCulture Gaming, and these are the 9 rarest and most valuable PS4 games you might own. Number 9. Exodrifter. Originally released for the 3DS and later ported to the Wii U, the Metroidvania throwback Exodrifter found its way to the PS4 in 2015 and eventually to the Switch last year. Even though it didn't gain a huge amount of indie platform attraction like what we see with titles such as Celeste and Dead Cells, it did garner enough attention to warrant a very limited physical run on PS4. 2,300 box copies were produced and eventually it sold out. It might have taken a while to sell out, but it didn't take long for the PlayStation collectors to come prowling. Despite there being only a few thousand copies in existence and being about astronauts, Exodrifter doesn't fetch an astronomical price. It is technically one of the rarest on this list, but because of the critical and commercial reception also not being astronomical, you'll be looking at around £70 for it. That money's not going to get you to the moon, but it's probably more than you bought it for nonetheless. Number 8. Gravity Rush Remastered. Everyone loves a good remaster, especially when it's something rather niche being blasted back into the spotlight. When Gravity Rush Remastered was announced, it was intended to be a digital-only title. However, Sony eventually came to an agreement with Amazon to produce an unspecified number of physical copies exclusive to Amazon. Even though not everyone knows of Gravity Rush, these remastered copies sold out surprisingly quickly, though many copies ended up back on Amazon through third-party sellers. Back in early 2017, you'd be finding second-hand copies of the remaster for upwards of £80, so I dread to think how much one of these goes for sealed. That was a while ago now, but as the next-gen systems surface and Gravity Rush continues to gain respect in the gaming world, that price is surely going to increase. Number 7. Night Trap 25th Anniversary Collector's Edition. Move over Grand Theft Auto, Leisure Suit Larry, and the Jules Guild Dating Sim 2019, one of the most controversial video games ever made, is making a name for itself once more, by actually being worth something. The full-motion video puzzle game was revived to, I assume everyone's delight, back in 2017 for its 25th anniversary. Originally pitched on Kickstarter back in 2014, the campaign failed spectacularly, as it only raised about 10% of its £250,000 goal. The title was picked up by a publisher in the end, and 3,000 PS4 copies were produced and sent out into the wild. Even though no one seemed to give a deep-fried crap about this title when crowdfunding, the release suddenly got the collectors interested, and now it's rather sought after. A PS4 copy of Night Trap will fetch you around £80 online, with copies bearing the retro VHS cover either guaranteeing that £80 or fetching you even more. If you can pry yourself away from those perky pixelated pillows, you might just get a little cash money for it. Number 6. Future Idiom EP Deluxe. Think Synthwave Star Fox. Oh god, Scott is scratching at the door. Future Idiom EP Deluxe's indie shoot-'em-up charm did indeed charm enough to minor success. Nothing mind-blowing, but folk did enjoy it during its initial digital run on PS4 and PS Vita. 2 years later, the title really took off, warranting a 4,000 copy physical release split between the PS4 and the PS Vita. Suddenly, the sales properly took off. The physical release sold out and became a collector's item overnight. The game had more of a following than ever before since more people came to know of this stylish shooter. Limited to only 1 copy per customer, the physical edition on reselling platforms is going for upwards of £100. The game itself wasn't exactly something to write home about, but it didn't stop the physical release getting collectors weak at the knees. Number 5. Strife. A retro-themed first-person shooter inspired by genre icons such as Doom and Quake. There is no surprise this title got people excited. Strife was successfully funded on Kickstarter, reaching a total of just over $200,000, exceeding the initial goal of $185,096. Doubling down on the throwback approach with overexcited 90s commercial-style videos and the boasting of the best graphics this side of 1996, Strife ended up with 2,000 physical PS4 copies produced to celebrate the title's full launch. These sold out pretty much instantly, as the buzz was unbelievable due to the amount of word-of-mouth hype going around the gaming community. Strife was received pretty well by players and critics, making those physical purchases all that more worthwhile. Surprisingly, you'll not be getting your hands on a new copy of this game anytime soon, at least physically. Used copies of the game are going for about £70, but if you manage to land a variant cover copy of the game, you could get around £120 for it. Number 4. Retro City Rampage DX. Riffing on the trappings of old top-down games of yore, Retro City Rampage DX became an instant cult hit when released back in 2012. Indulging in late 80s and early 90s pop culture as well as into other indie titles, Retro City Rampage DX tapped into a nostalgic aesthetic sensibility that Hotline Miami unfortunately took all the credit for reviving at around the same time. However, RCR DX still garnered some success and a moderate fanbase. When it came to a physical release, 3,300 copies were produced and, much like future Idiom, were split between the PS4 and the Vita. These versions took a little longer to shift than the other limited releases we've already talked about, but they did eventually sell out entirely. Second-hand copies can be found online for a hefty £130, with sealed copies setting you back upwards of £200. For a 7-year-old title, it's not doing too badly. Number 3. Griffin Knight Epic. Picture this, a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up featuring a knight riding a griffin through a medieval setting, defeating his once friends in a world twisted by an evil plot. Sign me and the rest of the world up. This sounds awesome. However, it didn't set the world on fire with its relatively unique approach to the genre. It wasn't that spellbinding on a technical level, so it lost out to its aesthetic ambition. Now, in an age of cupheads and ridiculously tight precision mechanics in 2D indie games, a pretty lacking title like Griffin Knight Epic would be lost to time. In the player's world, it sort of did. In the collector's world, not so much. Thanks to its middling reception, the physical release wasn't huge. Only 999 PS4 copies were produced, but with that unique pull of riding a griffin to victory across some rather beautiful levels was indeed enough to shift every copy. Even though the game isn't that good, it's become one of the most valuable PS4 titles, cropping up on secondhand storefronts only every few months or so. Prices are a bit all over the shop depending on who's selling it and where you're looking, but you'll be definitely coughing up £150 or more for a copy of an alright video game. Does that seem worth it? Number 2. Saturday Morning RPG. Saturday Morning RPG, as its title suggests, takes inspiration from, you guessed it, Saturday morning cartoons. As someone who spent the majority of his childhood learning to tap dance on Saturday mornings, I'm not overly familiar. Split into different episodes, this title gives you more control over combat compared to traditional Japanese RPGs. But it's still quite a significant release for the genre. With a huge boom of interest in the West for JRPGs, the physical release of Saturday Morning RPG was snapped up pretty darn quickly. Only 1,980 copies were produced, but they're still cropping up on secondhand storefronts, going for anywhere between £120 to £150. Similar to a few indie titles already mentioned, there was a physical Vita version produced for it. Even though there were more Vita copies produced compared to PS4 production, the Vita versions are more of a collector's item. Vita copies are going for near £200. Thanks to said success of JRPGs in the Western market, there was no surprise the Saturday Morning RPG didn't stay under the radar. And number 1, PT. If you find this in a box, you'll probably end up with a couple of $100,000 for it. It's not likely though, as no physical edition was ever actually produced. You must have been living under a rock not to have heard of PT, and yeah, that is a nice rock. Fine, I'll fill you in. Back in 2014, a free playable teaser, or PT, was released on the PlayStation Store. It was released to garner interest for a new horror game coming soon to the platform. The gameplay itself was both horrifying and well received, sparking a huge amount of excitement for the upcoming Silent Hills, the game that was announced at the end of the teaser. However, Hideo Kojima and Konami were at each other's throats. After the release of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain the year after, Kojima and his team were let go from Konami, and the Silent Hills project was cancelled. Konami quite violently shit the bed with this one. Fan reception to the happenings were excruciatingly negative, and they were booed at the Game Awards when Konami legally barred Kojima from collecting awards for his own game, and as well as all of this, PT was removed from the PlayStation Store. Even if you own a license for the game by simply downloading it when you could, you can't download it anymore. Thus, having a PS4 console with PT still installed is the only way to, inverted commas, own the game. Subsequently, systems with the title downloaded have been cropping up on eBay ever since, with prices in the thousands. It's not known how many PT-enabled systems have been sold since its removal in 2015, but if you've got a system under your TV with PT still installed and working, you could be in for a pretty penny if you so wished. And that's my list. Are you sitting on any of these titles and are looking for a good deal? Well, I expect a 50% finder's fee for your successful sale. You can follow me on Twitter at pickupchangetone for details on how to send over the cash. Thank you. Any other rare gems the PS4 has that aren't on this list? Let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe to WhatCulture Gaming if you haven't already, and our Teespring store has some pretty snazzy shirts and hoodies for you to significantly improve your look with. Link is in the description. I've been Rich, continue being brilliant, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye!